exited through the back of the house, across from which there was a large opening where I normally played. I looked around, walked toward the fence of the neighbors. They seemed to be absent. I heard no voice or sound emanating from there. The ram did not approach. He stood at a distance, watching me as I solemnly stared at the fence. I was feeling a little sad, thinking about my father. I sat down on the ground, leaning my back against the semi-gray brick wall. The ram was still observing me. Then he came to me. He bent his head, lowering it toward the earth. His head was in the palm of my hand now. I raised my knees and pulled my hand away. My head was now between my knees. It was not long before I felt a nudge. The ram was gently nudging me with his horns. I did not move. Still, he nudged me harder. I raised my head to look at my friend, who presently had his head on my thighs, with his eyes gazing upward at me. I was not surprised at this. I had always known that this creature's inner essence was special, smart. But now, as he stared at me, there was something distinct, eternal, and human about him. He lowered his head and averted his eyes downward. I observed his head and stroked it. My hand descended to his awesome, strong horns. Beautiful. I sat there repeating this motion with calm, and he lay there receiving it peacefully. This time, time passed, but we had no notion of how long we had been there. I was completely comfortable, worry-free. I was with my friend. At some point, we both became motionless. We stayed like this for about an hour or so, undisturbed, both dozing off. I felt a connection with him, but the moment's deep signification would only reach me in 2009, when I would begin to awake spiritually. Presently, a woman with a big bowl on her head was returning from the market. She recognized me as she seized me with her vivid brown eyes. Her heavy sandals made a slapping sound as she walked. Startled, the ram raised himself up promptly. I dug my head into my pocket for my flute. I put it to my lips and began blowing, not knowing exactly how to play it. The ram looked at me curiously, wondering what I was doing. I stopped to figure out how to produce a more harmonious sound. I placed a finger on every other hole and began to blow again. No, that was not it. I did not know how to play. However, as the big ram started hopping about me, I decided it didn't matter how well I played. I blew and blew with my might. The unharmonious sound excited him, and he hopped joyfully about me. Look, I thought, he was dancing. As I played, it did not take me long before I learned how to manipulate the flute and cause the ram to move to action. I blew the flute in intervals of harmonious sound and then paused. Each time I did this, my friend marched about. It was exciting and above all fun for him. It was a march, a harmonious march. His hind and forelegs marched. They actually marched. And each time I paused, he paused rhythmically. This cannot be. Surprised, I ceased playing and took out the flute from my mouth. A minute or so passed where I did not play it. The ram stood still, observing and staring at me. I put the flute back in my mouth and recommenced, and once again he danced. His hind legs, forelegs march. Forelegs, hind legs march. Pause. SAV ran past us. Cujo was still chasing him. They must have taken a break at one point. SAV probably came back from somewhere and Cujo started on him again. My friend and I went inside the house. He held SAV with his left hand while striking him with his t-shirt with his right hand. He delighted in hitting him harder with the t-shirt. What did he do to you? I demanded of full Cujo. This is a polite form of saying Mr. or Señor in English and Spanish respectively. It is used before a male person's name. Da or Davi is the equivalent for a girl or a woman. So fo cujo is fo, signifying it's being polite. He has no respect for anyone, he answered. By this, he really meant that Ese always spoke up for himself. The lamb was curiously watching as he stood beside me. Let him go, I shouted. Mind your own business. You're hitting my brother, I shouted at him. He turned to hit me as Ese stepped away from harm's way. Stop, Cujo, stop, I pleaded. The ram took a few slow steps toward Focujo, looking at him intently and beastly. Let go of my arm, I shouted. Focujo! The ram advanced decisively toward him. Let go of my arm, I shouted again. I yanked my arm about, but I knew Focujo was not going to stop. What was I to do? I thought about kicking him in the foot, but decided not to do so because he was older and bigger than me. I knew that if I employed force, he would have returned it twofold. However, I needed not have worried because I had a loyal friend. What happened next was a demonstration of love that would compel me to glimpse at the soul of all living creatures much later in life. The ram raised his forelegs and brought them down with a powerful stomp. The rise was awesome. The airborne hold seemed infinite. The fall was immense and thunderous. He curved his head forward with fury and passion, and consequently pushing his two horns forward wildly. The fall of his forelegs jolted his body slightly backwards and then forward again. His eyes intently met Cujo's and did not waver. Cujo understood the meaning of this and seized his infliction of violence upon me, but it was too late. My friend moved forward a couple of inches. He lowered his head and pushed his horns fiercely. Cujo took off running, heading toward the front door near the street. Call him off, he yelled as he ran out with the ram on his tail. A few weeks after my ram saved me from Cujo's beating, I walked into the kitchen one early Saturday afternoon and heard grinding of rocks. I passed the kitchen to the other side where the pepper grinding stone was. Focujo was passionately grinding something. I went closer. I saw red chili peppers. Still, I was curious. I walked even closer. There was something on the flat stone with the peppers. The whole place smelled of some sort of burned hair of an animal. Finally, there it was, staring at me, the head of a big lizard. I stepped back, stupefied. So, that was the smell I was sensing. Focujo had smoked the lizard and was now about to grind it with the peppers. On the fire was cassava boiling. I did not say anything to him. I simply observed in amazement. He seemed to be in a jovial mood. It was evident that his good mood was in the anticipation of his meal. As he walked over to the boiling pot, he smiled and said, "It's going to be really good."